it's hard, right, to really do what the scripture tells us to do.
Yeah.
It's hard when you don't have something or someone doing it for you.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, the evangelical church today, American church today, has just made it very simple for us to compartmentalize our faith in a way that doesn't cause us to have to live a different way, right? If you're a Christian and you're not challenged, then you're probably not exercising or living in faith. Welcome to the Church Dropout podcast. Church Dropout is a podcast. We talk about issues, topics, and teachings related to faith, life, and culture in ways that are sometimes funny, sometimes serious, but always insightful. If you have not already, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below. Keep the conversation moving forward. What's so funny? Just say it. What's so funny?
Because you said trammel.
I know that's what I said. I was just gonna keep rolling. Yeah.
Lisa.
But I didn't introduce you.
No.
Okay, that's Lisa. I'm Alan. All right. Okay. So I get a lot of questions, or I've gotten a lot of questions, especially since I did the interview with Dr. Tom Wadsworth, and this last one the last podcast together that we did on, most American churches are business. Mm-hmm. I've gotten a lot of questions about, I understand, what's going on with the church. I understand that there is a, issue with how we think about the church today, that the church is not a building or a place. The church is a people. Maybe even have made a decision to kind of walk away from the traditional church and, kind of pursue Jesus in a different way. So there's a lot of people who are just like, I get it. And there's a lot of people who have already been there and they see our content and they're like, man, this resonates. Yeah. I'm feeling this. This is what I've been feeling. And what generally happens after that is, and what I'm hearing is what now? Yeah. I get that. I agree, but what now? What do I do now? You know what I'm saying? I get it. I'm with it, but what do I do now? Yeah. What do you say? It's a big question, right?
It's a very big question. There's a lot of things that can be what next, what now? You know what I mean? Maybe what now is just be still. You know what I mean? What now could be, get into your word. Where are you? What now could be, finding yourself. And now you can look to see, okay, what do I need to do next?
That's good. Yeah, that's good. Thank you for tuning in to the Church Dropout. That's a good answer, Lisa. I'm serious. That is a good answer. A couple things before we get there, because we can expound on that a little bit. It is a complicated question. I think it's a big question, right? I think it's a question that cannot be answered pragmatically. It's not one of those questions that you can actually just put a process to and say, oh, here's the answer, right? It's a complicated question. Yeah. And I think it's intentionally supposed to be complicated. I think that's kind of speaking to where we are today with the church, where we expect some sort of system or form, right? And this is not in any way a rebuke against those who are asking the question or anything like this. These are just some thoughts that I have with regards to that question itself. Because I've asked this question, I've been challenged with this question by not only people who listen to our channel, but a few people that I speak to. friends and stuff like that have asked the same question. They're just like, yeah, I get it, Alan, but now what? Like, you know, what are we doing here? And so I get it. But a couple things. One, I kind of think that that's a system question. Like, I think it's a question that arises out of what many of us are walking away from. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it's a question that's really a part of, you know, not even a part of it, just kind of, it's a natural question when we're coming out of that system of church to ask, like, what now? It's again, I think we're so used to, in America with the American church, that we're so used to systems and, you know, things being done a certain way. And we're always looking to replace it with something else. You know what I'm saying? Like another system. And I think that's where we got to be careful is we move from one thing and we just adopt another system. And I think this is one of the differences with us is, you know, Church Dropout is not necessarily against the form of church. Now, we point to a lot of the things that are happening with the form of church. But our issue is not necessarily the form. Our issue is the essence. I think the church has become too concerned with form and has forsaken the essence. We've stopped paying attention to what the church is and started to pay a lot of attention to what the church does, and how the church behaves and acts and what it looks like, right? And opposed to, we've lost our identity. The essence of the church is being lost. And once we recover the essence of the church, then we could think about form and expression, how we should do the things that the scripture talks about the church does. We can answer that question. So we're not overly concerned with the form, although we do talk a lot about the form because the form is part of the problem. But I think to ask, what do we do now, sometimes could just be a question of replacing one system with another. You know what I mean? It could point us to looking for something else. And this is where I think what I think happens, right? People think the problem is going to be solved if we move from a mega church to a house church, that the problem is going to be solved. That's not necessarily the case, right? Because if there's a misplaced identity in a house church, smaller doesn't mean spiritual, just like bigger doesn't mean spiritual. Right. You know, so it's not about adopting another system. I think it's about putting on the full identity of Christ in terms of what the body is meant to do, what the body is meant to be, right? And I think that's kind of like what you were getting at, right? The other part that I want to mention really quickly here is this, and again, this is why I said this is not like a rebuke to asking that question. I'm just saying, like, I think this question rises out of the system because, truthfully, and I've had this conversation with people before, but the system of church that we've adopted today makes us lazy as Christians. You know, everything is there for us, right? We don't have to look for fellowship with other believers because there's something on every corner where so-called Christians gather every week. Right? We don't even have to do evangelism, right? We either invite them to this gathering here, or the church has some ministry where you go evangelize. It's not a part of your everyday life. You know, you just, you know, or the church does evangelism and, you know, you don't evangelize, right? Like, everything is kind of catered to us and it makes it hard. So when that gets taken away and you now have to be Christian, that's a shell shock. This is why some people won't leave the system. It's not because they don't believe the system is bad or wrong. It's because they actually have to do something.
Right.
You mean I got to go and create a fellowship? You mean I got to disciple people? You know, and so, you know, the established church makes it extremely easy to be Christian.
Yeah.
Everything's there for you. It's convenient. You know what I mean? Where once you leave that system, all sorts of questions that you didn't have to ask before, you now have to ask.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? Like, wow, like, I really don't, like, do I have any friends? Do I have anybody I'm really close with? What does it mean now for me to disciple my family? What does it mean now to be a disciple?
Right.
How do I gather with other Christians? How do I, now you have to begin to engage this in a way that you didn't have to before.
Right.
There's a passage in scripture that doesn't necessarily talk about the church, but it kind of relates to what we're talking about in this sense. Jesus, I think it's John 8, Jesus goes to, an invalid. He's been this way for 38 years. He's had this condition for 38 years. And if you remember the story, he goes, it's actually on the side of the temple, which is interesting to me, right? And Jesus goes, there's people who are suffering on the side, outside of the temple, right? You know what I mean? But anyway, so he goes, there's a guy there. He's been this way for a long time, 38 plus years. Jesus approaches him. He says, what are you doing here? The guy's like, hey, I'm just waiting for the water to start to bubble so that I can get in it and I can be healed. Because there was some tradition where if the water, started to move, then you would be able to be healed, all this type of stuff. So anyway, so Jesus asked him a question that puzzled me, used to puzzle me a lot. Like he asked him, he was like, do you want to be well? And it's like, man, that's just a dumb question to ask somebody who's been this way for 38 years. Why in the world would you ask him, does he want to be well? Why? You know what I mean? Like, that's like going to the doctor. They tell you got cancer and the doctor's like, do you want to be well? It's like, I have death in my body. Why wouldn't I want to be well? But the reality is that sick people don't always want to be well. Not because they love sickness.
Right.
But because it's harder to be healthy than it is to be sick. If this man, he was trying to draw out the man's desires. If this man would, if his life changes and he's healed, he no longer goes to this place where all his folks are every day and does the things that he now has to reconcile with his family because he's no longer there, right? He actually has to go to, like, his whole life would change.
Yeah.
Everything about his life would, to some degree, may even become harder than it is. Where people would help him to get into the water. They'd help him. Now, he himself has to do certain things, right?
Right.
And so I say that to say, like, some people don't want to, they don't want healing. You know what I mean? They want convenience.
Right. Because there's going to be some work that comes with that.
Right. You're going to have to change.
Yeah.
Things are going to change.
Right.
And it's the same thing when we become Christian. This is why Jesus is like, man, you need to pick up your cross. You know what I mean? Take up your cross. You're going to have to carry this. What Jesus did ultimately in that analogy, he carried this sign of death on his back. He carried it to his death. Yeah. And we're going to have to do the same. We need to take up our cross, the very instrument that's that's causing us pain and suffering. We're going to have to carry with us, right? But that's Christianity. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? It's not meant to be easy. I'm not saying it's meant to be hard. I'm just saying it's not meant to be easy. Right. We're kicking against the goad. We're doing something that's totally different, right? And so the reality is like, it's hard, right, to really do what the scripture tells us to do. Yeah. It's hard when you don't have something or someone doing it for you. Right. And so, the evangelical church today, American church today, has just made it very simple for us to compartmentalize our faith in a way that doesn't cause us to have to live a different way, right? If you're a Christian and you're not challenged, then you're probably not exercising or living in faith. You know what I'm saying? So if, and I don't mean like this like when people talk about faith, challenging your faith, and I'm talking about like, if you find it extremely easy to walk this thing out, then you're probably not walking by faith. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And this is why Christians look at the government the way we look at the government, or we vote the way we vote, or we want to Christianize society because we don't want to struggle. We don't want to struggle. And so some people are going to walk away from the system, or not going to walk away from the system, because what it takes to actually live this out is very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And we also have to realize that the system to some degree has made us lazy and has kind of, handicapped us from really living out the purpose that God has given us. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that now what question, it's a great question. Mm-hmm. It's a question that needs to be asked, but I think you said it, the now what question, that's going to take some thought, and it may take some introspection and some thought for you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So just a couple more things and we'll be done. But, so this is how I would answer that question. And then I also want to talk a little bit about where we're going, talking about Church Dropout.
Okay.
So first, I would just say this. How did the first Christians do it? They didn't have churches, big churches. They didn't have what we have today.
Right.
And the temple was not the church.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not an equivalent. They didn't have what we have today. It didn't look like it looked today. How did they express their faith?
Mm-hmm.
They lived in community with one another. They lived in community with one another. They built relationships with one another. They lived out their faith on a daily. And I think we just need to look at what our first church did.
Yeah.
Not as a template to do that today, but as a rhythm of how we ought to live as Christians.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
This is where sometimes the New Testament tricks us, because the New Testament is written by, the apostles to a large degree, those who followed Christ as apostles and or people who had special encounters with Christ, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what ends up happening is that we can think that the overwhelming majority of Christians are Christians who are like the disciples or like, the apostles, in terms of like, those are special categories.
Mm-hmm.
The overwhelming majority of Christians are just ordinary people. All right. So sorry, interruption. We even have a lot of those lately, but it is what it is. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So overwhelming majority of Christians in the New Testament are ordinary people. And the reason why I'm saying that is that they were people who just lived their everyday life,
mm-hmm.
right? They took on their Christianity. They took on Christ, and Christ became the head of their life. And so everything that they did became a reflection of their relationship with Jesus. They didn't necessarily stop doing everything they did. They just incorporated Christ into that. So they would go to work, they would eat and have fellowship. That's why a lot of the rhythms in the New Testament are just things that people do: get together, eat, right?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? You know, like communion, that's why I don't even go there. But anyway, anyway. So it's generally done by ordinary people, ordinary Christians, right?
Yeah.
Who lived out their ordinary everyday life.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? Joseph, went down, he worked at, the Jerusalem furniture store.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That's what he did.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And he carried Christ with him to his job, right? Fellowship with the people who were within his community. Like, it was this very everyday rhythm.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? And so the reason why I'm saying that is that because that's what I feel like in part, that's what we're missing as Christians today. We've compartmentalized our Christianity into a system and opposed to a everyday rhythm of our life. And if we just lived Christianity out in our everyday life, there would be no disconnect between what now and what is.
Right. Yeah.
There's only what is. If you remove church from my life, the only thing that should be different is I just don't attend a church on Sunday. I don't attend a weekly fellowship, but evangelism wouldn't go. Relationships wouldn't go. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Feeding and helping the poor wouldn't go.
Right.
Whatever it is that is a part of the everyday Christian experience wouldn't leave if that left.
Yeah.
The problem is that has become the existence of our Christian faith. And when you remove that, then people are like, what do I do?
Yeah.
Right? Because that has defined Christianity. But what defines biblical Christianity is ordinary, everyday people who are living out their faith as a rhythm of their everyday life.
Yes.
So what we need to do is incorporate Christianity into our everyday life in the way that it was meant to be. That's what we do next. That's kind of like what you were getting at before. Like, we need to explore what Christianity really is and begin to lean into that reality and walk that out.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? Like, that is what we're called to do. And that's what the first Christians did.
Yeah.
They didn't go look to build buildings for people to come to. You know what I mean? Like church planting is today, right? Like, it's like, oh, we first have to establish a system for people to exist in, and then people come be a part of the system. That's not how they work.
Right.
They just talk to people. They evangelize, which led to discipleship, which led to communities growing. It wasn't a system. It was a rhythm of life.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? Jesus sees these guys, they're walking, they're pondering what's going on. Jesus approaches them, say, hey, what are you talking about? Well, hey, we've heard this and we've heard that, and then he's like, yeah, let me explain it to you as we walk to this thing. Like, it's a part of our everyday life.
Yeah.
And I think once we disconnect from the system and we start to re-understand what Christianity really is, what it really is.
Yeah.
The only thing that should change is how you fellowship.
Yeah.
Not what you do as a Christian.
Right.
Right. So the what now, I think, is to get reconnected to the reality of what Christianity truly is from a New Testament perspective, and then begin to reorient your life around that and follow and heed the things that Christ said to do in Scripture for Christians to do. Right. And that's just, what it is. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's very difficult. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard, but I think that's the reality.
And I would say at the same time, when it becomes your everyday activity, it's actually not as hard.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because that's all you know. You know what I mean?
Yes. And that's all we should know. Right. But yeah, I agree with that. And so now, in saying that, that wasn't just us escaping any type of responsibility. Not that I feel like we have any in that sense, you know what I mean? Like, like, I don't feel overburdened anyway. So, because I understand people are like, hey, you guys are just railing on the system, I get that, we're just calling out what I think we need to call out. But there are some next steps that I think that we want to be able to do. Our desire has always been to build a community, not a channel, right? We're not going to chase the algorithm. We're going to talk about things that we feel like we want to talk about, or things that we have something to say about. But that's not algorithm based. That's driven by the type of quote unquote ministry that we're attempting to engage in. But we want to go deeper in community. That's the goal, right? Where we can begin to have some more of these type discussions with people who are on the same journey that we are.
Yeah.
And the journey that we're on is re-exploring faith from the margins, right?
Yeah.
We may have walked away from the American church system, but we're exploring Jesus. We're walking away in search of Jesus, right? Trying to find deeper connection and understanding of who Christ is in order to be able to, go deeper in our relationship with him, right? And so we want to walk with those individuals. And, part of the issue is that, the way things are set up, you get people from every direction, right? You get people who are not necessarily looking to connect. They're looking at trying to tell you what's right and wrong, right? People who are just purely critiquing. And that's fine. I don't mind critique. I mean,
right.
that helps sharpen us, right? But that also takes away from individuals who are genuinely exploring these types of things. And what we've thought about is this: how do we do that? Like, how do we, in some senses, help both, but be able to create a community where we can have these discussions with people who are actually on this particular journey? And so a couple things that, we probably will be exploring here very shortly is, one is creating some sort of community, that that we can engage in these conversations in, and that we can, give special attention to some of these things. That's not necessarily for the larger, communal group.
Mm-hmm.
This is for individuals who are actually rocking.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not sure if that's going to be on this platform or another platform,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, are we going to use the community tab here, or are we going to use something like Patreon or something like that? But we want to establish a different type. We want to establish an additional community for those who are actually walking on this journey, so that we can have open, honest discussions like we always have, but we can actually have interaction, right? So right now we don't do lives, we don't do that type stuff, and that's intentional to some degree. But when we start this community, those are things that we'll do there. We'll do a lot of stuff, but those are the things that we'll do there.
Right.
I also have something else that I'm looking into that can possibly help with people being able to find community, find individuals who are on the same path. I can't share everything now, but hopefully it will be something that people can utilize as a tool to help them to engage with people locally. You know what I mean? And find people who are to connect with, because I do understand it's difficult, right? And we live in a digital age. We might as well take advantage of the digital age that we're in. And so there is something else that I'm looking to do. But the main thing is, I think what we're going to do is try to create a community, or continue to create a community, kind of go deeper with that community and create a space where that community can actually grow and breathe, and we can have more interaction and discuss these things, a little bit more in depth. We'll always have a public face in terms of, the stuff that we regularly do and stuff like that. But again, if we want to engage, we want to be able to engage on a different level. So we're probably going to create something a little bit different in order for that to happen. And so that'll probably be, coming up here soon, as we think through that. And so, but those are, two things that I think we'll do. I know one was pretty vague because I just don't want to give it all away, but I just wanted to say, like, the idea is not that we're trying to just leave you where you are, because that's not our journey. We're trying to figure this out too.
Right.
And that's the whole point of what we do. This is, we're trying to be open and transparent with where we are and the things that we think about, and where we're going, and so, yeah, I'm excited about what that will look like. But yeah, that's where we're going.
All right.
Any clarifications or anything you think we need to have, or anything to add?
No, just keep watching. More to come.
You said that on an up,
Sorry.
Yeah, your inflection was there, like something else was supposed to come. But yeah, I would just say, stay tuned in, keep watching, and give us your thoughts.
Yeah.
Honestly, give us your thoughts. We love to hear your thoughts on everything that was said, and and I'll probably post something in our community section, that may detail this out. But we'd love to hear your thoughts as well, and things that you guys think we should cover, that you would like us to cover, that even things that you would like to see to some degree. We can't do everything, but we do plan on doing something. Again, the idea for us is not to build a channel; it's to build a community. That's the whole goal. And to utilize this as an opportunity to, share with you. So we'll go from there.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for tuning in to the Church Dropout podcast. And again, rate, share, and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below. Keep the conversation moving forward. We'll talk to you soon. God bless.
Good night.